Hey, my name is Brian Coleman. I'm the managing principal of Economic Incentives Advisory Group. Every year, there's over $50 billion left unclaimed by small and mid-sized businesses. Don't be one of them. So excited to talk to you more about that.
Welcome to the Cedar Harvest Show, where we focus on financial education for a variety of things that affect not only your life and business, but also your spouse, children, charities, and your legacy. We discuss everything from health insurance to pensions, wills and trusts to high-level tax planning, and today I'm excited to add government programs. Our intention is to bring financial and legal professionals together with everyday people who need their help. We have real conversations with real people who have real life questions and scenarios. I'm your host of Cedar Harvest, Miles Raga, and today's show is part of our business series. I'm so happy to introduce our special guest, Brian Coleman, who has served clients as an economic incentive consultant for over 22 years and is managing principal at Economic Incentives Advisors Group. Today, we're going to have a high-level conversation learning about programs you've likely never heard of that Brian can help you tap into. So on that note, let's jump right into it. Brian, welcome, buddy.
Thank you, Mario. This is fantastic. I appreciate you having me on your show. This was exciting.
I am so excited to have you here, brother, because prior to getting into the insurance and financial space, I was a small business owner, had 120 plus employees for over 10 years, building out commercial structures and whatnot. And I tapped into, fortunately, I was in Florence and tapped into our grant department there in the Department of Florence. And so it opened my mind that there are a lot of government programs out there that we never hear about.
That's right. Yeah.
And had I not had a restaurant where I spent time getting to know these grant writers and economic development directors and those people like that, I would have never heard about any of it. So that's safe to say that I'm willing to bet that most business owners have zero clue about what you do.
I don't think a business owner should ever feel bad about it because typically, and the way that we've tracked it, there's about 12,000 programs in the United States.
12,000.
Yes. So to try to keep an eye and track every one of those programs can become a full-time job. So most of the companies that we speak with, whether it's a Fortune 500 company or a smaller company, early stage or family-owned business, usually we hear, well, this is too good to be true, or why didn't my CPA know about this? And those are typical answers that we receive. But that's just a lot of programs to track nationally.
Wow. 12,000. And, in defense of the CPAs out there, I mean, how could they possibly learn about all these programs, right? I mean, here, that's what your business is. And you probably don't know about all 12,000.
We don't. Yeah, it's really very, very difficult to track it. And I think that's where we have to look at the industry type. That's one of the first things that we look at, whether it's a manufacturing company, it could be a staffing company, financial services, call center, healthcare. And then we start our deep dive. And then the second thing we look at is geography, where they either have one location, because there's a lot of programs available at the state and local level. And then we look at the industry type. That's what gets the conversation started. Then we could start drilling down and looking at the incentives that are specifically available for that particular client.
So are there particular databases? Because this is all public information, right? You just have to know where to look.
It is that's something that over the last 2 decades, people have been trying to figure out, how do I capture all of that information in one database? And I'll tell you why it's so difficult is because these programs change all the time. There's different funding dates, funding amounts, application due dates. Sometimes in a certain state or city, the economy gets very strong, like what we're seeing in Scottsdale and Tempe. For example, they no longer have programs at the city level. Same thing goes probably with San Francisco, other states that have booming economies. Those programs aren't going to be as needed.
Oh, because you're tapping into federal, state, and municipality.
That's right.
And so each one can have their own different independent sets of programs.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's different expiration dates. So there's, to try to track every single one of those becomes a very, very difficult task to do.
Wow. So, I mean, a guy like yourself, I mean, I assume you're just attending conferences and you hear about different things. I mean, how do you begin where do you begin to find these things?
So I was fortunate enough about 17 years ago, we added one of our partners onto the firm, and she had been tracking these programs and had done better than anything that I had seen. And I'd worked with some larger companies like CBRE, a large commercial real estate firm that had an incentives practice group. And one of my partners, Maggie Chapman, um, she had done a tremendous job of starting to track those. It was very interesting how the two of us came together. And even though our database isn't perfect, it's really, really good.
Okay.
So it's been fantastic in bringing that partner in together.
Mm.
She had a team of people that was constantly researching those programs, that it always has to be updated, like literally weekly. And even then, it needs to be verified and validated. So even though the program may have been perfect, let's say 6 months ago, those things change. So then when we do research for a client, we still need to verify if those programs are updated. Funding levels, what type of companies are eligible to apply for them. So it's dynamic, right? Dynamic meaning that it's always going to be ever evolving. It's never a static set of incentives.
Hmm. That's I so that being said, I mean, when would a business? I mean, obviously there must be certain industries. I think I heard you said healthcare, you said a few other things, manufacturing. I mean, are there certain businesses that are more inclined to be able to take advantage of these things, or is this I have a business and I should look into it? Is it every business should look into this?
I believe so because it's worth a conversation. Typically, in about a 10-minute conversation with a client, we could let them know if there's any incentives available to them. So, for example, I think you brought up that you have a client that's a staffing company.
Correct.
So, then what we would do, okay, staffing company, that's probably a high volume of employees and they probably hire a lot or they place a lot of people.
Hmm.
We'd ask questions like, what state are they in? And then the other thing that we would ask is, how many people does the staffing company hire? And do they place them and do they transfer from the staffing company and do they become an employee with their clients or do they stay on board with the staffing company? Do you know that, Mario, in that case?
I want to say they typically stay on with the staffing agency, but but surely if they were offered a full-time position, I don't know if that's their business model to try to ultimately place them. I don't believe it is because they're in the hospitality space.
Okay,
So I think the hospitality space is happy to just have a labor pool to tap into on an as needed basis.
that's fantastic.
I'm pretty sure that's so if that helps.
That helps a lot. In that case, anytime that staffing company hires, for example, a veteran, or if they hire somebody that receives some form of government assistance, they could receive up to $9,600 per hire. So
Any government assistance.
some type of government assistance. So it could be SNAP, it could be some type of, we want to be a little bit politically correct, but it's a questionnaire that they basically answer at the time of hire.
Okay.
If the staffing company hires them, and it costs no money to do this, and they fall within one of 16 categories, then the staffing company can get up to $9,600 if that applicant falls within one of those categories. So that's just an example of a company that we were just discussing earlier that would qualify for what's called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. And that program has been around for probably about 30 years.
This is a federal program.
It's a federal program, correct.
Still on the books.
Still on the books. Still on the books. It'll be interesting to see with, the new administration, what they're gonna do with some of I think they're called the SNAP programs, and remember, when I say I think, this is something that I have to verify with my
Sure.
team, but it'll be interesting to see what the new administration does with the SNAP program. But still, if you hire a veteran, there's a good likelihood that you're gonna qualify. The program's been around for 3 decades, so that's just an example of one of the programs that if we had a discussion with somebody, we'd let them know that that's a program they should be pursuing. So if you look at it, it's a federal dollar for dollar tax credit. You hire 2 people, you could reduce your federal tax liability by up to about $18,000 to $20,000 just by screening your applicants to see if they qualify. So that's a really, really good example of why it's important to have that discussion. You may come to me, Mario, and say, "Hey, we've got a manufacturing company. that's a client of yours or a mutual friend or an acquaintance. Manufacturers, that's kind of the king of incentives. Why? Because the CapEx is very heavy. They typically pay a little bit more than, for example, an entry-level position.
Okay.
Um, they're probably gonna employ, north of 25 to 30 people, and most states have set it up that they want to attract manufacturing to their what we call locality. So manufacturers almost always qualify for incentives, whether it's a capital investment credit. So if they invest a certain amount in CapEx, they'll get a percentage of that. It could be that they qualify for the research and development credit. Almost all manufacturers qualify for that. That's a federal program,
Mm.
but then states have um, piggyback programs that will allow you to qualify at the federal and state level. So I don't want to go into too deep. The point
Sure.
is, if you're a manufacturer, you're almost 95% chance that you're going to qualify for something.
And surely they probably have that they understanding, right? I mean, they're looking that community probably knows to look into these incentives, whether it be at the county level to avoid property tax or whatever else. I mean, are you running across any
It's
people that are like, "No
surprising.
idea."
Yeah, I just met the other day with a company that's pretty large. I'm gonna say they're probably about $50-60 million in revenue. So I consider that,
Yeah,
above mid-sized company.
sure.
He had heard about programs like this. He had spoken with some of the state agencies, but to a CFO and a CEO, they're almost like, "Okay, too good to be true, or the paperwork's gonna be too burdensome." So that's a good example of somebody that maybe on the peripheral, I'm sure somewhere he's heard, but then it's the company's ability to slow down and have somebody like us or another firm basically explain the process and letting them know that if there's just a little bit of paperwork they can complete, then they're going to qualify. So in that case, with that gentleman, the CEO, he's been a resident of the Valley for quite some time. He's probably gonna receive somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2 to $5 million. I know that's a big range,
But
but
2 on the low end?
2 million on the low end, and it's a program in Arizona that if you're a manufacturer, you're gonna receive $20,000 for every net new hire or 10% of the capital investment. So he's gonna be growing pretty rapidly to support one of the big semiconductor companies. But he still, I think, is kinda questioning whether or not this is a real deal. So it's part of our job to educate them and let them know that they should be exploring these programs further.
It's interesting you say that because I'm running into that with some of again, getting into, being in business for so long, I've had a lot of great conversations with a lot of different people, and being in a government town like Florence, being a county seat and I was very fortunate to have a lot of great conversations with a lot of high up government officials, whether it be the county supervisors, economic development directors. So from the county level down, even some at the state level, it opened my mind a lot.
Yeah.
But it also, because of those conversations and now getting into again the insurance and financial side in my second professional life, I have noticed that when I bring up these things to clients, like,
Yeah.
hey, you realize you could tap into this? That too good to be true. That I'm concerned about messing with tapping into some of this government money because it's almost like people feel like they're just kind of asking for trouble.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
get that.
you know what I'm
Been
saying?
doing this for a long time where it could be $1 million that's just sitting there to be applied for, and it's still to this day, I don't.
What do you think the psychology is about that? I don't understand that. Why are business owners so? You think they're just? I get it if you're doing something a shady business, but it's like almost like you're kind of like they almost feel like they're opening up their books for the government to come in and like spy on them. I don't.
I think
Is
that
it,
I think that you kinda hit the nail on the head, that they somehow then are, entitled the government's able to go in and say, "Hey, how are you using that money?" Where in reality, that's not, the case. Um, Amazon's taking advantage of these programs, General Motors, Google, they don't have any problem taking that money, and that's what we explain to our clients, that these incentives aren't just designed for those big companies. It's just a matter of having the right time to kind of just address it, slow down and evaluate it. We can show them the statutes. We can show them other companies that might be competitors of theirs. that are taking advantage of these programs. It's just smart business. Something I was thinking about, Mario, on the can you imagine if people just said, I don't want to take advantage of the mortgage interest deduction?
Right.
Why would you not? It'd be like saying, I don't want to take advantage of the mortgage interest deduction. It's there. It's just kind of one of those things. It's a foundational, it is an incentive program. So when I explain it to somebody like that, saying, "Hey, it just takes time to just review the program and make sure that you're following through with the paperwork." Now, some of these programs do require reporting. I want to be very transparent in that. So, for example, if you're getting a job creation incentive, you just want to see that you created the job. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If it's a capital investment program, you just have to show the receipt and the invoice that you spent that money on new machinery or equipment or improved your space. You're just showing an invoice.
So now, is that something your company helps make sure that my company would stay on track with that, or you just kind of give me the roadmap and then I'm on my own with that? How does that work?
Well, when we present to somebody, we always let them know that they could do it on their own. I think that's imperative because it'd be a falsehood. Sometimes we've been approached and said, "Hey, do we need to use your firm?" And the answer is always going to be no. Somebody can always apply on their own,
Right.
right? But if you want it done right and you want to, per se, cross the T's and dot the I's,
Alleviate headaches, man. I don't want problems.
then you work with a firm like ours because that's what we are is we're an extension of your team that's helping you capitalize on these government incentives. So we manage the reporting, we interface with the state agency or the city or the federal government, and we just make sure that everything's done correctly. And fortunately, knock on whatever this material is, we've never had an issue of the client ever coming back to us and saying, "Hey, you did it incorrectly." Um, but it's worthwhile. Can you imagine if companies didn't claim some of the incentives that are just so prevalent, especially during COVID, like the PPP or the ERC program? Companies slowed down and took advantage of those. And what they don't realize is the incentives have been around for, I want to be conservative, at least 30 years. So I've been in this professional industry space for 30 years.
Okay.
There's been incentives ever since I've been around, working professionally. So take advantage of them.
I think that's a big part of the disconnect between the general public and business, the business community and the political community, is people really don't understand how the government comes up with. They have a particular cause and passion in the long term programs they put in place to try to bring these incentives to the table to try to get people going that direction,
Right.
right? And there's a lot of, and that was a real lesson to me, like of just how that cake is made. It's not just, oh, boom, it appears this program that all of a sudden we had this road built or this new school project, whatever it may be, right? It was, I just had people, I think, have no idea. And, at the end of the day, they just have no idea, and they really should reach out to a company like yours. There's another one. I'm sure there's plenty of them. I personally never ran into them,
Yeah.
right? Until I ran into you and I heard about this company, your company. I'd never thought to seek out a company. I always applied for grants and I went through economic development
Yeah,
coordinators.
and you can do that. I mean, that's something, you were smart. You were very savvy and you did it. And that's like I said, when we
I
have
was fortunate. I wasn't smart. I just paid attention to this person who said you're in economic development. What's that mean? What do you mean? What do you do? Oh, I help people with grants and bring in jobs. What do you mean? Tell me more. I want to employ people,
Yeah.
you know, but if it weren't for that, I just was fortunate enough to have that person come through because I had a restaurant.
Right, and some of the economic development directors, you're gonna run into really good ones, and we've seen, unfortunately, very few because 'cause we've managed these nationally. Some of them are fantastic where they don't need us because they've designed their state or city program that's so efficient that it's almost like, "Hey, guys, really, it's just one piece of paper." I'll give you an example of one here in Arizona that you wouldn't need a consultant. If you're a manufacturer, there's a way that you could get a utility discount, and it's just probably a two-page form that you need to complete. Those programs are fantastic, but then there's other programs that do have moving parts, like where does the employee live? Where's your location? How long is that employee staying with you? There's a payroll report that needs to go in. Those programs can also be managed internally by the client, but in that instance, it might be a good idea to really make sure that it's being managed thoroughly and properly. Um, I want to kind of give you another example of one that was just, in my opinion, was a little bit of a ridiculous program. It was in California, but you should have taken advantage of it. Remember, we're not writing the laws. We're just helping our clients capitalize on what's out there. But going back to the California program, California had these areas called enterprise zones. And I believe it was a little bit political on how these zones were created, but there was also some math where they were looking where areas were distressed. And if I recall, if you had a facility in a zone and an employee that lived in the zone, you received up to $36,000 per employee. 36, much larger than the ERC credit, which got up to like 21 or 28,000. Not only that, Mario, but you were able to go back either 3 or 5 years. So if you didn't
Capture?
yes, there was a firm
Recapture opportunities?
there was the program sunset, but it was in place for about 2 decades called the California Enterprise Zone. And there were consultants and then like little pop-up shops. And, you know, you could kind of start doing the math, especially if you had 20, 30 employees that lived in the zone. And I'm not talking about like little zones. They were very expansive. And they were even in cities that had strong economies like San Diego, Los Angeles, over in the textile garment industry. Um, Parts of San Francisco were in enterprise zones. A lot of the Central Valley, so Bakersfield, Fresno, Lodi, um, those had huge zones. But it was it was it was not the greatest program for the state of California, but their rationale is if you're gonna create jobs in these kind of distressed areas, and some of these areas were not that distressed, Mario, but if you created jobs in those distressed areas, they gave you $36,000,
That's real
and
money.
it was real money, but the point is, you don't wanna lose out on opportunities like that. If the state where you have a business, you need to understand what's there because then you're really leaving money on the table by not taking advantage of that.
And a lot of these things, so it sounds like you're talking a lot about employment,
Yep.
right? And so sounds like there's huge employment incentives. Are there other types of incentives programs out there outside of the employment that people should be aware of?
Sure. Some of them, if you're in software, if you're developing an app, if you're a manufacturer, if you're in biotech, you're probably involved in some form of research and development activity. So there's been a long-standing program. As far as I know, it's at least 2 decades old, if not longer, but it's called the R&D tax credit. I'm not the expert within our firm. We have a gentleman that oversees that practice group.
Love to have them in here for that.
Yeah, he's amazing, Chris Bird. Um, so in that particular case, if you're involved in that activity, then and you're involved in research and development, you can receive a tax credit that works out to be about 8 to 14% of your R&D expenditures. You get to it's a dollar for dollar tax credit. Now at the Arizona level, they have what's called a refundable credit, meaning that if you don't have a tax liability, they'll give you up to 100,000 in cash. So it's a really, really solid program, Mario. So manufacturer biotech, if you're developing or designing an app, then you could claim the R&D credit. And once again, little out of my expertise, but we have a team that's phenomenal.
We just had a kid in here, young, brilliant mind, a couple weeks ago, Joe, that we need to let him know about that. And he was doing something within that world that you just described. And he probably has no idea that there's potential dollars for him out there. So is it safe to say that there's kind of specialists in all these different industries? Like you said, there's an R&D, and like maybe it sounds like you're a lot more maybe of an expert in the employment side. It sounds like
So our
what are the
firm
pillars? I guess.
I think there's so many of them, but I'll just kind of talk a little bit about what I know, and
Okay.
then I'll kind of maybe mention
All right.
something that's outside of my space. There's job training grants. So you had asked me about other programs.
Okay.
The city of Phoenix has a really good one. So if you're located within the city of Phoenix and you train your employees, you could get up to $100,000 covered in outside vendor training. So that's a program.
Huge.
Um, there's the R&D credit, there's job creation incentives. Um, there's if you purchase a building, you can have a cost segregation study done. So if you purchase a building, instead of depreciating it over 29 or 39 years, by doing a study, which basically looks at how the building was constructed, and they'll look at certain items and they put them into certain categories, but it allows you to depreciate that entire asset in the first 1 or 2 years. So it's a kind of a time value of money play.
Wow.
You can even do it as if you invest in a residential property. You can do a cost segregation study. There's also some programs right now that are a little bit questionable, like the 179D. It's a program that if you invested in, for example, upgraded lighting, energy efficient HVAC systems, there's some major deductions there.
How small of a company can take advantage of that? Like, I mean, what's the smallest you would say that that would pencil for?
Um,
I mean, if they were to, if somebody
5 people.
are you talking about like this HVAC upgrade,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if you have a
Well,
commercial property, they should, or this is only for
if they
large
bought
manufacturing facilities.
no, no, no. If they bought a new building, like, for example, where we're residing, if this was to be purchased, you'd wanna do a cost segregation study.
Oh, this is
Y
only upon purchase.
This is upon purchase. Now the 179D, I need a little bit of assistance from my team there.
Okay.
Um, that program, and once again, this is how dynamic it is, the new administration may get rid of that program because they weren't really some of the energy efficient programs that have been around now for about 10 years, it looks like those might sunset.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, I don't want to speak out of turn on these. Some of these are willing to, it looks like they're going to go away.
and it's in more of that stories, you better take advantage while it's there.
Right.
Because once while they're here, whatever, it's good money, but it's not like they can come back and kibosh the program and come back and take that money away from you.
Correct.
There,
Yeah.
there's no recourse if you play your cards right, right? I mean, you don't really have any negative.
there's no downside. Like there's a date that are set with all these programs, whether it's a federal program or state program, there's going to be a sunset date. That sunset date basically grandfathers you in. I'm very fortunate to say this about our firm. There's a thing called a clawback that if you're not following through, then the government can come back and get some of that money. But if you dot the I's and cross the T's, then you're
You're
good.
good. No liability
If
there.
there's no liability, and once again, 20, 25 years and kind of almost 30 years, never had that happen where we've had somebody where the government claws back. Part of it is just good communication too, Mario, where if you ever think that you're not going to meet some of your goals to qualify for these incentives, the agencies just want that communication saying, hey guys, we're having a down year. Um, they're viewing it almost as a partnership. And if you let them know, then it's hard for them to ever want to come back and claw back any of the money. But yeah, we've never seen it happen. But for me to say that it's not possible, if you are not reporting properly, if you're not thorough, it can happen. We've just never seen it ever happen in my career. And we've worked with hundreds of companies. So
That's great. That's great. Well, I mean, there's a testimonial right there of why it makes sense to just pay a professional service versus doing it on your own, save the money, and then all of a sudden you're concerned about clawbacks and things you don't know.
right.
Where do you dot those I's? Where do you cross those T's?
Can I add one other item to
Please,
that?
please.
That's why we also like, when possible, we like to work with our client CPA firms. We said it earlier, it's not your CPA's job to track all these programs. So we almost always communicate better when a CPA is involved, if possible, so we can disarm them. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that like saying, hey, look, here's the statute, here's the program. And then I'd say 95% of the time, the CPA is like, hey, thank you. They don't really say thank you for not making us look bad. But kind of reading between the lines, they're like, oh, what a great program. I have other clients that likely qualify. And that's typically where that discussion goes. But by involving the CPA, it almost adds a layer of transparency that we're not trying to be a tax preparer. We're just trying to help that business and
Sure.
hopefully make the CPA look better. So usually if a CPA is involved, a client CPA, that's a very positive thing for us.
Yeah, I guess. It'd be hard to imagine an environment where that wouldn't be a positive
Right.
situation. Well, and this is where small businesses, especially, well, I guess any business, size
Mhm.
business, you have things that you want to do and things that you have to do. And many times we get so caught up doing the things that we have to do.
Yeah.
And that ends up costing us a lot in time of understanding that and dollars doing what we have to do, that we don't look around for other ways to save money. We get caught up in the very surface level things of how do we control our cost of goods sold, right? How do we get cheaper produce, cheaper lumber, cheaper materials?
Yep.
Where do we find other labor? And we really don't look for those offsetting mechanism like what you bring to the table, that can bring real savings to the company, right? So that way now it's freed up some cash. So that way maybe now they can put together this employee incentive program that they didn't have the dollars to do.
Right.
They can put this 401k program or something to free up some cash,
Yeah.
right? And so usually businesses, speaking from personal experience, I tried to outgrow my problem,
Yeah.
but just focus on growing revenue, not focusing on, how much hemorrhaging is going out through, wasteful dollars and then tapping into incentive programs, right?
Right.
I mean, that's such a incentive programs.
Well,
It never comes to my mind to look at,
it
bro.
it I'm so glad that you brought that up because oftentimes, you're in that business when you probably wanna pull your hair out when you see certain companies saying, "Gosh, if you slow down and looked at a thing like a defined benefit plan," or I notice up there an IUL, like, you're probably going, "It just takes you a couple hours to package that." It's really frustrating because it makes your company more profitable. There is no doubt it improves your profitability to capitalize on some of the incentives, and your competitor is probably looking at them. Also, the bigger companies are looking at them. So you as a business owner, I think it's important that you review it, but then we kinda make up all these excuses saying, "Well, gosh," you start kinda, like, building a case as to why not moving forward versus saying, "Hey, let's explore." And I think you wanna be curious, right? So if you start seeing companies and people that are very successful,
Mhm.
most of them are looking at programs that are gonna ease their way to success versus making it more difficult. So it's a mindset, Mario. And I think that's probably like your podcast. I think you're trying to find people that says, "Hey, let's be curious and let's ask questions.
Right.
Let's just see if we qualify or not." Like, what does it hurt to have a 5-minute conversation and even find out I don't qualify for anything? Well, then you're like safe, right? Just asking the question.
Well, I could tell you what, Brian, here's where I've come to my realization. I think we've all been, I don't want to say indoctrinated. That's a very strong word, but I think we have been kind of trained, to what I refer to as just take our medicine.
Yep.
Right? And
Yep.
and we just have kind of just learned, I mean, what we all grew up hearing the statement, there's two things in life you can count on, what? Death and
That's
taxes,
his axes. Yeah.
right? And so we're automatically just trained to accept it. And most people I think do just accept it,
Right.
right? And they don't look. So then when they find out there's somebody who's taking advantage of it, they get frustrated. Why is this guy making so much money and not paying a lot in taxes? Well, that guy's likely probably paying attention in a lot of other areas, surrounding himself with professionals like yourself who can help him take advantage of this program or that program. And maybe take advantage is the wrong way. Again, it sounds aggressive, like you're taking advantage, but it's just really utilizing the very tools that are out there.
Right.
Right? So more utilization of resources versus taking advantage of resources. Yeah.
Well, and I think it goes back to what I must say. The mindset shift is that what they're doing, the state and the cities and even the federal government, they're encouraging you to grow.
Right.
They're wanting to see you create more jobs. Why? Because if you create a job for somebody, they're probably spending that money in the local economy. They're going to a restaurant. They're gonna buy a new car. They're gonna likely either rent a home or buy a home in that local economy. So they're smart.
Yeah.
They know that, you know, so then it's just kind of doing a mindset shift saying, "Hey, I'm a business owner. Um, I'm improving the local economy. Even if you're creating 1 or 2 jobs,
Yeah.
what is there for me since I'm helping stimulate this little micro market or a larger market?" It's you're you're putting a lot of risk as an entrepreneur. So why not capitalize on, maybe that's a better word, capitalize on what's available to me
Sure.
so I can grow and I could be more efficient and I could deliver more value to my clients. So maybe that's where the mind shift Mario needs to go is, hey, let's not take advantage of this. Let's capitalize
Capitalize.
on this,
I
right?
like that better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a that's a lot more,
Yeah.
uh
It's palatable, right? And it's an accurate, it's a real accurate state.
so I obviously am sure, your website, I believe, what EIAG dot.
Yeah, EIAG.com.
And so I'm assuming, what you must have, do you have some sort of form on there that people could fill out to, like, see it as my what might I qualify for at a high level, or is it just, they need to just actually have a conversation with somebody? How do you have it set up too?
We basically just set up a 5-minute no obligation. And when we say no obligation, we really mean it because we don't want to invest a ton of time. If you call us and we find out, you're in a certain state or city or industry type, or the wages that you pay your employees may not qualify you for it. Or we might even say, hey, we don't do that program, but here's a resource to get that to you. That's almost that's a positive. So really it's kind of difficult to not have at least a 5 to 10 minute conversation to see if you qualify. And it's not a hook by any means, because if we can't partner with you, we're going to hopefully continue that dialogue. But if you don't qualify for anything, or if there's a resource that you should know about, a program that we may not manage, there's really no downside. Worst case scenario, you've invested 5 to 10 minutes to see if there's something that's available to you. But going back to your form, there's too many
Too many variables.
questions. Yeah, too many variables.
Yeah,
But usually it varies on where you're located in your industry type. If we could just start with where you're located in industry type, that leads then to prompts us to ask additional questions from there.
gotcha.
Yeah.
This is where it all begins.
Yeah, location and industry type.
Cool. Well, Brian, this is, obviously a very deep, deep subject. We could talk about this for a long time, but I think that's
Yeah.
probably a good jump off point, and a just overview to get to
Yeah,
know you
yeah.
a little bit.
Super fun.
And definitely look forward to, getting you back in here so we can maybe, get a little more nitty gritty in some of these. Maybe we can have conversations, figure out, how do we want to, disseminate this information? Is it going to be industry specific, more area specific? I don't know what makes sense to get information out there to the public, because that's the challenge here. But that's also the beauty of the age we live in is, we're in an age of information to get to a lot of people. So I look forward to hearing how you feel is going to be the best way to approach this.
That'd be great, Mario. I think part of this is understanding your audience, right? Like if we know how your audience is designed and made up and what they want to hear, um, possibly the next time that we visit, we could kind of use a couple case studies of some of the people that listen to your podcast and then go from there, right? Because it's going to be pertinent to them. So we could design that and ask questions and, come up with some real life case studies and scenarios.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Awesome, Mario. Thank you so much.
I think. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.